Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mace. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Director Ahuja, last Congress, I was pleased to be part of the bipartisan coalition to help bring about passage of the Postal Service Reform Act. As you know, that legislation requires employees, dependents, and retirees of the Postal Service obtain health insurance coverage through the Postal Service Health Benefits Program by 2025. Is OPM on track to implement the Postal Service Health Benefits Program by 2025 as required by law?
Thank you for that question. We are certainly on track. It's a very aggressive timeline, Congresswoman, but we are we'll be issuing an interim final rule in April that is really going to govern the entire program. We just put on the street an RFP for the entire IT infrastructure to manage enrollment and eligibility. So we're meeting our performance metrics on this particular pretty sizable effort within our agency.
Do you have any serious concerns about the implementation?
Well, like I mentioned, we're managing in a very aggressive timeline, and we will do our best to get the basic requirements up for postal reform and then add to that. I do want to mention, Congresswoman, that we will be coming back in our FY24 budget, which was already anticipated.
Yeah, that was my next question.
Okay.
Can you provide us with an estimate of the annual cost to administer this program?
Yes, I can. I know the particulars are in the budget that haven't been officially released, but we have laid them out.
Okay. All right. Will you also provide us with an estimate of how many staff will need to be hired to implement the program?
Yes, we would be able to do that.
Good. As this committee knows all too well, new programs must have proper oversight and safeguards in place so that they do not become rife with waste, fraud, and abuse. GAO recently highlighted significant concerns about waste, fraud, and abuse in FEHB enrollments. How will OPM make sure that these same issues are not carried over into the Postal Service Health Benefits Program?
I appreciate that question, Congresswoman. I do want to mention one thing that is distinctive with the FEHB program that will not be with the Postal Health Benefits Program is that the FEHB program has been a decentralized program for 60+ years, meaning that every agency manages the enrollment of their employees. And so while we have issued guidance and communication to agencies to manage eligibility, it is a challenge from our end because it's decentralized. The Postal Service Health Benefits is actually going to centralize that enrollment, and we see it as a test case for what we would like to actually incorporate with the FEHB to manage improper payments.
Well, that is also a question that I have. Will you be able to apply any lessons learned with the implementation and creation of the Postal Service Health Benefits Program to improve FEHB?
Oh, absolutely. I think we're really taking from the things that we'd like to improve with FEHB and incorporating them in the Postal Service Health Benefits Program, such as centralized enrollment, being able to check eligibility. We'll have a decision support tool that will be much more customer friendly. These are all the things that we would then, Congresswoman, like to take back and make those improvements with the support of Congress.
Well, I've heard, I haven't been here for the whole hearing, but I've heard enough from my colleagues to know that they have shared with you the frustrations all of us have about the incredible backlogs and delays in response to requests, including congressional casework. So I'm going to give you a chance again to talk about what OPM is doing to alleviate delays and backlogs in response times and congressional casework, because this is not the way a federal agency should work, and I support my colleagues in saying these employees need to be back in their offices answering calls from constituents.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for that question. I've said also here today that I've given a lot of attention to retirement services. I said this during my confirmation that I'm focused on it. We have a number of efforts underway around improving the inventory, which we have. been able to bring the inventory down and actually improve the number of cases that we've processed by 20%, which
I heard
hopefully
you say
you've
that.
heard that.
We don't, 20% when it's nothing isn't anything. I mean, if you're improving from such a low bar, so we don't want to hear about improving percentages when the bar was set so low. Just tell people to come back to work and answer the needs of the constituents. They need to be in their offices, just like Ms. Mace was saying. If you don't show up in the private sector, you lose your job. And that's what should happen in the public sector. It's hardworking taxpayer dollars that are hiring these people who refuse to come back to work. Fire them if they don't come back to work. My time is up. I now recognize Mr. Burchett. I'm sorry.
Yep. Sorry, he showed up.
Oh, yeah, they told me nobody was going to show up.
I know. We now enter into the 5-minute questioning portion of our hearing today. Chair recognizes Ms. Foxx for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Pemberton, just this Saturday, we saw one of Senator Rand Paul's staffers attacked and stabbed multiple times in Northeast D.C. by a man who was released from prison just the previous day. According to Police Chief Robert Conti, on average, any given homicide suspect in D.C. has already been arrested 11 times before he or she actually commits homicide. Why is D.C. allowing violent criminals to remain on the streets for so long? And I'd like a fairly concise answer, please.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question. Most of the answer for that is that the criminal penalties that exist within our criminal justice system are incredibly weak. And that's due a lot to provisions passed by D.C. Council. There's the Youth Rehabilitation Act, there's the Incarceration Reduction Act, there's the Public Safety and Justice Act. There's a number of provisions that have been put in place that reduce sentencing guidelines for D.C. Superior Court.
So to keep violent offenders from returning to the street, the D.C. Council needs to tighten up on the penalties. Is that correct?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Thank you. Again, for you, Mr. Pemberton, as part of Vision Zero in D.C., we're seeing new bike lanes, traffic calming measures such as lane closures, and new medians being constructed across the city. What impact do these measures have on police response times?
Well, particularly in main thoroughfares, when bike lanes are introduced, it does impede police response times because it makes it much more difficult for emergency vehicles to get through those areas.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Mendelson, we all know schools were shut down for long periods during the COVID pandemic, which has created tremendous learning losses, drops in test scores, and contributed to the city's low graduation rates. Do you see a link between these school closures and the high truancy rate that still linger in D.C.? And I just need a yes or no.
It's difficult to just give a yes or no. There is some link. But as we're coming out, I mean, our school system, our schools closed and we had virtual learning, as did jurisdictions around the country. And so we're coming back from that.
Well, as I'm sure you know, nearly half of these students qualified as chronically absent during 2022, a rate which has persisted since the COVID school shutdowns began in 2020. During this time, we saw an increase in juvenile crime, especially carjackings. Do you see a link between the high truancy rates and increased juvenile crime?
No, I don't.
DC? You don't?
I do not see a link there.
What is the D.C. Council doing to address the high truancy rates and rising juvenile crime in D.C. if you don't see a link?
As the chair of the committee of the whole, I have had a number of hearings on attendance and truancy, and I'm very concerned about the attendance rate. But let me be clear, the accurate measure of the quality of our educational system is in the test scores, like the National Education Assessment Score, NAEP, and we see improvement. Like all jurisdictions, the scores went down during the pandemic, but they've been coming back up. Yes, attendance is a concern, but in terms of educational outcomes, we are seeing some improvement.
Thank you. Mr. Pemberton, common sense says reducing consequences for crime invites even more crime. This not only harms residents of increasingly lawless communities, but businesses and their customers Are you concerned that increased crime will push businesses out of D.C.?
Absolutely. There's dozens of restaurants and other commercial establishments that have closed in the past few years, and I think many of them have left due to crime.
Are you concerned that an increase in crime will discourage people from moving to D.C. and perhaps push those people instead to the suburbs of Maryland and Virginia, or even out of the metro area completely?
Yes, what we hear from citizens quite often is that they're looking to move out of the city because of the crime rates.
Well, I want to say that even a staffer of mine kept hearing gunshots around their house, and a week ago sold their house and moved out to Maryland, because this is a very, very real issue. So one more question. Given these negative economics and social consequences, why do you think D.C. City Council has adopted such a soft on crime stance?
Well, I think part of it is because they've always had this lean towards defendant-friendly policies, but frankly, over the past few years, I think they've been chasing headlines and trying to jump on the bandwagon of anti-police rhetoric that's happening all over the country.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes.
And I'm going to read the two paragraphs that are this bill. It shall be a violation of subsection A for a recipient of federal financial assistance who operates, sponsors, or facilitates athletic programs or activities to permit a person whose sex is male to participate in an athletic program or activity that is designated for women or girls. For the purpose of this subsection, sex shall be recognized based solely on a person's reproductive biology and genetics at birth. What we're saying in this bill is that if you were born a male, then you cannot participate in, you cannot compete against people born as female. It's very simple. And I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, put into the record an article called, entitled, "A Biologist Explains Why Sex is Binary" by Colin Wright, Wall Street Journal, April 9, 2023. I'd like to submit that. Thank you very much. This is very simple again. We're talking about people born as males not participating against people born as females. It's so simple. And it has nothing to do, not one word in here talks about targeting trans people, giving physical examinations, none of the things that our colleagues have said here. This is ridiculous what you are saying.
No, excuse me, I reclaim my time. What is ridiculous is that we're spending time with all the problems that we're faced, including a spike in gun violence against children. What is ridiculous is that we are here debating this.
No, we're here to protect women.
You can't even define, you say you don't even know what a trans woman or a trans girl is, but yet you want to ban them from playing in sport.
No. The word trans is nowhere in this bill. It says...
We all know what this bill is about. We all know what this bill is about.
No, this bill says if you're a biological male, you cannot participate against biological females. It's as simple as that.
And
that is what it boils down to.
And so you do not believe that trans women are women?
They're males, sorry. If they were born as males, they're males. Right. There's no way to change your biological sex.
So we just learned that we can't identify a single case where somebody was denied a scholarship because of what is happening right now, and yet there's this urgency to bring this legislation to the floor to somehow protect people. I don't quite get it, Mr. DeCano. Can you explain what the urgency about this is, and I mean, and was this the first bill that was marked up in the Education Committee?
It's one of two first markup bills.
Of all the issues out there,
yeah,
in terms of issues protecting kids in school, this is like the top one or two issues that the Education Committee thinks is vital to bring to the floor.
And Mr. McGovern, the moral panic that the chairwoman is attempting to create over this case of the athlete competing in intercollegiate sports winning a competition, this bill would do nothing to affect that. This bill is about banning sports participation of transgender girls and women in K-12 and college sports, but it would not effectively deal with whether or not in elite competition there's this question over trans women participating. This bill has nothing to do with that. This bill would not remedy the concern that the chairwoman raised. And let me also say that the real harm here is the exclusion from participation of trans young people, trans kids, trans middle school kids, trans high school kids, for whom the huge value of sports is about participation. It's about connection to community. And this bill would stigmatize them. This bill would separate them out. This bill would subject them to even more isolation than the bullying that they often face and the physical dangers. Trans kids are in need of our protection, not of stigmatization. And despite these words not being in the text of the bill, the effect of this bill would be exactly that. Let me just sort of read one of the final paragraphs from the governor of Utah, his veto message. The governor of Utah, as he vetoed a very similar bill, and he wrote it to so Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, wrote to Stuart Adams, who was the president of the Senate, and Brad Wilson, the Speaker of the House of Utah. He said, there's one more important reason for this veto, I must admit. He says, I'm not an expert on, I quote, on transgenderism. I struggle to understand much of it, and the science is conflicting. When in doubt, however, I try to err on the side of kindness, mercy, and compassion. I also try to get proximate, and I'm learning so much from our transgender community. There are great kids who face enormous struggles, and here are the numbers that have most impacted my decision. 75,000, 4, 1, 86, and 56. 75,000 high school kids participating in high school sports in Utah. 4 transgender kids playing high school sports in Utah. 1 transgender student playing girls' sports. 86% of trans youth reporting suicidality. The chairwoman claims, this is not the governor's words, but I just want to insert, claims that she doesn't know anything about trans. 56% of trans youth having attempted suicide. 4 kids and only 1 of them playing girls' sports. That's what this is all about? 4 kids who aren't dominating or winning trophies or taking scholarships? 4 kids who are just trying to find some friends and feel like they're part of something? 4 kids trying to get through each day. Rarely has so much fear and anger been directed at so few. I don't understand what they are going through or why they feel the way they do, but I want them to live. And all the research shows that even a little acceptance and connection can reduce suicidality significantly. For that reason, as much as any other, I have taken this action in the hope that we can continue to work together to find a better way. If a veto override occurs, I hope we can work to find ways to show these 4 kids that we love them and that they have a place in our state. I was getting moved just reading that statement from the Republican governor of Utah. My respect and admiration for him just grew enormously just having those words registered. I would implore the members of this committee to heed his words seriously.
Well, I thank you for that, and I too, I think those were very moving words by the Republican governor of Utah, who's not playing to the cheap seats, who's actually putting the well-being of the people he represents first and foremost. I mean, the bottom line is this bill is not about protecting kids or children or anything. This is a bill that is an attempt to try to drive another wedge in our society, to try to create an issue where there isn't one. And in doing so, will directly impact in a very negative way a vulnerable community in this country that are already the subject of bullying and ostracization, and I may go right down and you're going to see more young people turn to suicide, more young people, go down the road of depression and feel like that they're not worth anything, that we're questioning their dignity. As I said in the beginning, I think this is just an awful, rotten thing to do. This is, and my friends on the other side, the creepy obsession with these issues is really, I think, beneath what we should be doing at this point. Want to protect children? I mean, kids are getting murdered every day in gun violence, and here we are talking about this. I mean, I don't. There's a disconnect here. Maybe this polls well amongst the small, amongst the MAGA base or whatever, or maybe you can find ways to raise money of it. But this is not responsible legislating. This is a terrible thing to do at this point. And so let's get on with this. And again, let's get it over with, and hopefully the Senate doesn't take it up. And I trust the President would veto it if it ever reached his desk. But we should be about bringing people together, about promoting understanding and respect for everybody, for promoting the idea that everybody is worth something, everybody has dignity. And here we are dealing with this, which will promote bigotry and hate, and quite frankly, I think will result in more young people taking their lives. And I think that's a terrible, terrible thing. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from North Carolina, Representative Foxx.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. I thank our witnesses for being here today. You know, it's getting a little tiresome to hear President Trump blamed over and over for the Afghan withdrawal. It was the Biden administration that pushed the disastrous and chaotic withdrawal, and it's the Biden administration that's responsible for its poor execution. We all have confidence in our military, but when they're given orders from their commander-in-chief, they follow those orders. Mr. Sopko, were the orders to withdraw in the manner that they withdrew given by the Biden administration?
Congresswoman, as I mentioned before, we did not look at the withdrawal, my agency, so I really, you could ask the State Department IG, I think they looked at the withdrawal.
Ms. Angarella, do you have a comment on that?
From USAID's perspective, no.
No. Ms. Shaw?
I'm sorry, do you mind restating the question?
Were the orders to withdraw in the manner that they withdrew given by the Biden administration?
So our work looks specifically at decisions and directions given by embassy leadership at the time. And so we did find that they were taking primary lead, working with the Department of Defense to execute that non-combatant evacuation.
But somebody had to give the order to the embassy, right?
Presumably so.
Presumably so. Okay. Mr. Storch.
Yes, ma'am.
Were the orders to withdraw from Afghanistan given by the Biden administration?
So thank you for the question. We reported out in the lead IG reporting on the facts of what happened with the operation. In terms of doing any oversight related to that, as I've testified, when the evacuation took place, our office pivoted to working on very time-sensitive issues related to the evacuation itself, to the refugees and that. So we haven't done any independent oversight that I could testify to. As I've also testified, we have gone back and gotten the full after action that was done by the department, and my folks and I are examining that, and if there's work to be done, we'll do it.
I think it's a pretty pitiful situation where we have 4 federal government employees who cannot answer a simple question: was the order to withdraw given by the Biden administration? I'm really not sure that that's under any question.
Congresswoman, I will cut to the chase. Obviously, the Biden administration was in charge, so the order had to come from the Biden administration. I think what all the IGs are saying, particularly mine, I have no jurisdiction to look at that decision. But obviously, it was made by the Biden.
I didn't ask you to look at the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
I ask a simple question. Were the orders to withdraw given by the Biden administration?
Somebody in the Biden administration gave those orders.
Okay. Ms.
I'll
Andrews?
take a risk and say that, but
Oh.
Yeah, no,
Goodness,
to the
a
extent that's the
government-
question, there's no
A
question.
federal government employee taking a risk. Oh, my goodness, this is a red letter day. Ms. Angelella, do you agree with that?
I would agree with IG Sopko, yes.
All right, let's take this. Ms. Shaw, will you agree with that?
Yes, I will agree.
And Mr. Storch?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, finally, we get an answer out of this panel having to do with the withdrawal. Okay. Probably my next question is going to be a waste, but so I'll go on. Let me ask this question, or let me make a comment. I think the hasty and chaotic withdrawal reeks of poor planning, failed execution, paid with the blood of American soldiers. But as inspectors general, all of you had offices at the U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan. So what was your experience like while planning and executing the evacuation of your offices?
I'm happy to answer that. I think the statement you made about it being confusing, hectic, and whatever, I did have people there. It was. And I think the best example of this, if you can get access to it, is to get a hold of the descent cable. Because what we were told, I've never seen it, but there was a descent cable done by career State Department employees who describe, we've been told, the problems and how chaotic and how horrible it was at that situation.
Well, thank you for that information. Ms. Angelella.
Yeah, I would say our direct hire American Foreign Service officer staff were withdrawn earlier, but USAID IG had locally employed staff, 6 of whom were trying day in and day out to get to and through the Abbey Gate. And as a member of the senior leadership team at the time, we were engaging 24 hours a day on a text message exchange with all of that staff. And as I testified, it will stay with me forever.
Thank you. Ms. Shaw.
So our 2 remaining U.S. personnel left with the ordered departure in April 2021, so did not experience the circumstances of August, but our work did find that it was confusing and chaotic.
Thank you. Mr. Storch.
Yes, ma'am. We had a number of offices at different times in Afghanistan doing oversight. The number of people in country started to decline beginning in 2016, and then with COVID. So by the time of the actual demise of the Afghan government and the like, we were primarily working from Qatar and other locations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, I apologize for going over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in support of H.R. 734, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Acts. The Democrats have gone to great lengths to call this bill extreme. The Democrats have gone to great lengths, being almost hysterical, to call this bill discriminatory. It is neither of those things. It is a one-page bill, which is rare in Congress, that strengthens existing protections for women, ensures a level playing field for female athletes, and protects women and girls from the Biden administration's radical regulatory scheme. It's quite telling when the other party attempts to tear things down without offering an alternative vision. Democrats refuse to posit a reason for allowing biological men to compete in women's sports that comports with principles of athletic competition like fairness and integrity. Democrats also refuse to address the implications of their position. If men can compete in women's sports, should they be able to take roster spots from women, rob women of hard-earned achievements? Instead, they appeal to emotion and call the other side bigots. It's such a tiring act, Mr. Chair. How about providing evidence that self-identification is rooted in biological truth. Explain that a post-adolescent male athlete has zero physical advantages over women. Democrats like to pretend they're the party of science. Where's the data? The Democrats vote against this bill, the Democrat vote against this bill, including Biden's threat to veto it, is a vote against continuing to give women and girls equal opportunity to participate and compete in athletics. We on the Republican side are grounded. We live in reality. So does the rest of America. Ask working class Americans if Muhammad Ali should have been allowed to box women in his heyday, or if Usain Bolt should have run the women's 100 meters. It's not about callousness or lack of emotion. This is about grounding a leftist ideology that's lost its collective mind back into reality. In fact, Republicans are teeming with admiration and support for the women and girls who have come so far to get much-deserved recognition for their athletic achievements. The left wants to talk about erasure. Well, let's talk about how American female athletes are being erased. We are not sensationalizing this problem. It exists. Females are being hurt by it, and action must be taken to stop that. With that, I hope this debate and the eventual passage of H.R. 734 help bring sanity to women's sports, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves.
The gentleman yields back. I yield myself 5 minutes. There's some things that I want to talk about in terms of what we're taking away, but before that I want to respond a little bit to what the ranking member has said. You know, before the Pell Grant, people paid for their own education. Before the government got involved, people paid for their own education. It's always about what the government isn't doing as opposed to what is the individual responsibility in this country. And I have to say that I think turning our culture on its head as though it's up to the government to pay for everything is just insane. We used to have a culture where people felt they had their own responsibility. And by the way, the 10th Amendment says that if it isn't outlined for the federal government to do, it's left to the states and the individuals. And the federal government isn't assigned a duty to take care of education. It's not in the Constitution. So I just want to say I think our colleagues try to turn on its head the culture in this country and going from where individuals take care of themselves and to a place where the government's supposed to take care of everything. Now let me say my colleagues have made a lot of hay over what Republicans are supposedly taking away. Well, I'd like to highlight that the majority, 53.8% to be precise, of Americans in Democrat districts don't have a college degree. Additionally, of those members, 3.3 million have never stepped foot on a college campus. The majority of Americans' Democrat districts will have to pay for this program. Those 53% will have to pay almost $26 billion for those who had the privilege to go to college. And to what end? If this Biden debt scheme went into effect, we would be back here in less than 6 years because this administration isn't doing anything to actually fix the root problems, which is the high cost of going to college. 2/3 of Biden's debt transfer plan would go to the top half of earners. Among federal student borrowers leaving school in 2024, 70% of debt will be owed by students who went to graduate school, and 39% of the total will be owed by graduate students expected to earn more than $100,000 annually during their careers. Let me be perfectly clear. Republicans support individuals pursuing post-secondary education if that's what they want to do. But colleges have not been held accountable for far too long. The solution to the challenges facing our system aren't to just forgive debt, but rather to crack down on the system to ensure students aren't being taken advantage of and tuition costs going up higher than the rate of inflation. And I thank our witnesses for being here. And I'm going to ask a series of yes and no questions, so I really want you to say yes or no. I don't want to have to stop you. Mr. Quall, this committee has requested multiple times, beginning April 30, 2021, that the Department of Education provide all valuation reports conducted by FI Consulting showing the student loan program was nearly $500 billion in the red before this administration took office. Despite multiple commitments to provide this information, including by yourself in sworn testimony in front of this committee, the department still refuses to comply with Congress. I want to discuss the briefing the department provided the committee on December 17, 2021, to which department staff said they had not seen the entirety of the report and were unable to locate it at that time. Mr. Quall, yes or no, did the department have in its possession the final evaluation report prepared by FI Consulting when committee staff were briefed?
Well, we are...
Yes or no?
Well, Ms. Foxx, I'm trying to provide the best answer to you that I can. We have provided a copy of the unredacted report to Congress and to GAO.
Was the staff in possession of the report at that time?
We've provided an unredacted copy of the report
The answer is yes or no.
Well,
yes or
I'm
no?
trying to give you the best answer I can to the question.
No.
We provided
Well, the answer should be yes, because you had it and the staff did not tell the truth. Mr. Quall, do you take seriously the requests of Congress, yes or no?
I do.
Do you believe that Congress should receive important information from the department, such as, for instance, the valuation reports we requested, before the department provides them to outside organizations, yes or no?
I believe that the department has an obligation to cooperate with Congress to
yes
provide it
or no?
To provide it the information it needs to fulfill its duties.
Mr. Quall, I'm holding the final valuation report that we requested, yes or no. Did the department provide this report to us?
We provided an unredacted
yes
copy
or no?
of the report. Yeah, I believe we did provide an unredacted copy of the report to you.
Are you sure?
Well, that is my understanding.
Are you sure that the department provided an unredacted report? It's very serious, Mr. Quall. Your answer.
Well, it sounds like you may have information I don't have. That is my understanding, that we've been cooperating fully with the GAO as it studies this model. My understanding is we have provided unredacted information to you.
You might
and
need
if there are,
to get better information from your staff. Did the department provide this report to the Student Legal Defense Network? Yes or no?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, Mr. Quall, when did you first receive the final valuation report I'm holding? A date, please.
Well, respectfully, I'm not sure what you're holding. I think you're referring to events that happened.
That report that I said was here, from FI.
Ms. Foxx, I'm happy to try to provide whatever information it is that you need.
Okay, there'll be a follow-up then, and we'll expect a prompt response from you. Mr. Quall, the only conclusion I can draw from your refusal to provide Congress with this information is either you're incapable of understanding basic requests or you simply don't give a damn that you're hiding the true cost of this administration's actions from the American people. Either way, it's unacceptable behavior from the top higher education policymaker in this administration. Now, Mr. Cordray and Mr. Quall, you've said a lot about your communication with servicers. However, I'd like to submit a letter for the record from the Student Loan Servicing Alliance, who states that when it comes to return to repayment, servicers have, quote, not received final written guidance on the details of the plan of action on the restart of loan payments, not yet been granted permission by FSA to communicate with borrowers about repayment, and seen net reductions in investment and servicing by an estimated $35 million. With all due respect, this department has had almost 2 years to come up with a plan to return borrowers to repayment. And what I'm hearing here is that servicers have no guidelines, no funding, and no ability to reach out to borrowers because you won't let them. At this point, it feels less like incompetence and more like an intentional ploy to break the student loan program and use servicers, Congress, and anyone but yourselves as scapegoats so you can replace it with your radical free college agenda. Mr. Quall, can you commit to taking personal responsibility if the transition to repayment does not happen smoothly? Mr. Cordray?
Yes, and we have no incentive to break the student loan system.
Are you all going to continue deflecting accountability for your action? And I'll submit this report, Mr. Chairman, for the record.
No objection.
I yield back.
No objection. Thank you so much. I'd like to recognize Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And at the outset of my time, I just want to, again, do a quick refresher for my colleagues and some of the people listening to this hearing.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sue. I will recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Sue, I take my duty to conduct oversight very seriously. Unfortunately, Secretary Walsh did not take his obligation to respond to oversight seriously. During your short tenure, your track record appears to be about the same as his, at least until you attempted to cancel your appearance at the last minute and are here today only because my threat to issue a subpoena caused you to reconsider appearing. In most cases, you've responded to the committee's inquiries with a vague letter providing none of the requested documents, therefore, thereby technically responding to the inquiry, but not, in fact, coming close. Will you commit to providing fully responsive answers to the committee's request? Yes or no?
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Foxx. I am very happy to be here today to testify. I understand that our teams worked together to
Ms. Sue,
find the date.
Yeah, I just need a yes or no answer, and I appreciate your being here. And you don't have to say thank you very much for the question. That just takes up time.
I appreciate that. Chairwoman Foxx, I want to say that I take the oversight role of this committee and of Congress very seriously.
Then you will be saying yes to my question. Yes, you will answer our request completely. Is that right?
Chairwoman Foxx, my team understands that it is our job and it is my request that we respond to oversight requests and work with your team to make sure that you get what you need.
Do you understand that failure to provide complete responses can result in the committee taking compulsory measures?
Yes.
Good. You know that word. Ms. Sue, in March, my staff requested performance information on DOL's workforce development grant programs. The department's had over 2 months, yet the information that has been provided to date is incomplete and lacks employment and earnings outcomes for a significant number of grantees. How can your department effectively manage discretionary grant programs if you're not tracking grantee performances?
Thank you, Chairwoman Foxx. It is very important, as you say, to track outcomes, to make sure that we are good stewards of federal monies.
Okay, then my request should be very simple. Just hit click and send what you've got. Can you commit to providing performance information on all of ETA's discretionary grants by the end of the week?
Chairwoman Foxx, it is my understanding that we have been responsive to requests from you and from this committee. If that is not the case,
well,
yes,
let
I
me
commit.
just tell you directly, your department has not been responsive. So please review our request and respond appropriately. Going forward, will you commit to posting the employment and earnings outcomes for grant programs on the department's website?
Chairwoman Foxx, I'm not clear specifically on the details of what you request, but we have worked to be transparent about our grants and also about outcomes, and I agree with you that it's very important to make sure that what we're funding works.
If the letters are not clear, and I read those letters very, very carefully, as do our staff members, to make sure they're clear. But if you would simply send a response back and tell us what's not clear, we'll certainly clarify it. But we do think the letters are very clear and that the information we need is very specific. So let me switch to the wage and hour division briefly. Despite the wage and hours division nearly 10% increase in funding over the last 4 years, it collected the least amount of back wages for workers since FY 2010, down by nearly 33% from 4 years ago. The number of workers receiving back wages is the lowest on record for WHD. As I said, down by more than 51% from 4 years ago. These results are not due to a resource issue, and COVID is no longer a legitimate excuse. These failures reflect the management problem. What are you doing as a manager to fix this poor performance?
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Foxx. As the Deputy Secretary of Labor, over the last 2 years, I had responsibility for management of the department and worked closely with the wage and hour division to make sure that we were
we already know
performing
that.
our mission.
We already know that. So what's the solution?
So one of the things that when we came in January of 2021, the department, their enforcement resources had been cut dramatically in the prior administration, about 14%. And we have, in the time that we have been here, worked to rebuild the division, to train staff, and to make sure that we are investigating not all workplaces, right? It makes sense to be targeted and to be smart and to identify which employers are actually engaged in violations and which are not, right? The vast majority of employers are
Ms.
complying
Sue,
with the law.
You have effectively taken up a lot of my time without answering questions, so I will now yield back my time.
Congresswoman Foxx.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to tell you, my blood just boils when I read about what's happening in DOD and to hear the answers that we're hearing today, not because I'm angry at the people here, but this is ridiculous. We claim to be the greatest country in the world, and yet we cannot, the Department of Defense cannot produce a clean audit. What in the heck is this? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. It does not, I love your analogy of a rocket launch, but you know it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how to do an audit or how to find things that belong to your office. I looked up systems because my staff said, you know, we've got lots and lots of systems. What do you all, over 300 systems in the Pentagon? So what is the definition of a system? A set of principles or procedures according to which something is done. A set of things working together as part of a mechanism or interconnecting network. What's clear is these are not systems because they're not working and nothing gets done from them. Something's wrong, deeply wrong in the Department of Defense. And they're wasting taxpayer dollars. And that is absolutely unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. I want to ask a question. I just need a very quick answer. Can any one of you name one system in the DOD that is working? Each one of you. Is there one system? Is there two? Just tell me. Is there one system that works?
We do have a number of systems that work in the procurement field. The standard procurement system needs to be retired. It's a legacy system. It works. We're working with the comptroller on the standards to make sure that it communicates with the financial system. So it's really all about the data standards behind that.
Okay, well, Mr. Mansfield, I want you to answer that question too, but one of the questions I had to do with the fact, you said that that system works, but in 2021, the Office of the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan reported that the Air Force spent $549 million to purchase 20 cargo aircraft for the Afghan Air Force, but due to unreliability and numerous complaints about safety, the program was suspended, the planes were destroyed, and turned into scrap metal. And you just told me that the Office of Procurement system works? You explain that to me. I can't understand this fact and your answer.
I am not familiar with that particular fact, but I do not believe that would be part of the standard procurement system. I will take that back and understand which system presented that fact.
So you have a standard procurement system, but then you have an organization that works outside the standard procurement system. Is that what you're telling me?
There are a number of other systems, logistics systems, financial systems. I was just speaking to the system that we use to write contracts.
Okay, but I'm going to follow up on this with you, and I want a response on how you're telling me that the procurement system works, but we had a debacle where $500 million of taxpayer dollars were wasted when you're telling me that system works. Mr. Mansfield, very quickly, do you know of a system that works? And it better be better than the one he just explained.
Unfortunately, what I would say is that there are systems that are capable of working. The difficulty is whether or not the individuals who are using those systems are...
So then fire them. Get rid of them if they can't do the job. It sounds to me you have a culture problem. Mr. Khan.
I don't know of any system in DoD that works as intended.
That is an indictment that is unbelievable. We have 345 systems, and not a single one is working as designed. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Lee?
5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Shapley, Mr. Ziegler, thank you for being here today. Blowing the whistle against a man as well connected as Hunter Biden is a truly courageous act, and I hope that all of my colleagues can appreciate that as well. Mr. Shapley, I'd like to start with a simple question. When did you start your career as an investigator with the IRS?
In July of 2009.
Thank you. And in what year were you promoted to a supervisory role?
In 2018.
So that's 14 years of service at the IRS, with 5 of those years in a senior leadership position, correct?
That's correct.
Did you ever, in your 14 years of experience, see an investigation be handled in the same manner as the one we're here to discuss today, the one into Hunter Biden's taxes?
I have not, no.
And when were you made supervisor of the investigation in Mr. Biden's Operation Sportsman?
In January of 2020.
By your estimate at that time, when did you initially believe that the evidence was sufficient to request physical search warrants in California, Arkansas, New York, and Washington, D.C.?
So Special Agent Ziegler drafted an affidavit in April or May, and that was when for the search warrant.
Of 2020?
Of 2020, yes, I'm sorry.
And it was a short time after that you began to suspect that career officials at DOJ were, quote, dragging their feet regarding the next steps in the investigation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And 2 months later, in June of 2020, you came to the belief, expressing as such in communications with the IRS CL leadership, that if normal procedures had been followed, that these search warrants would have already been executed. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Was this within the typical time frame for the self-imposed investigative pause that DOJ historically tends to implement in cases preceding elections?
It was not. The official Department of Justice Public Integrity stand down came on September 4th of 2020.
After the initial steps were inexplicably denied, prosecutors continued to decline to advance on promising leads. There were, for example, many problematic text messages and emails on the infamous laptop in August 2020. When were you informed by Assistant U.S. Attorney Wolf that the DOJ would not allow a physical search warrant on Hunter Biden?
So I don't recall the exact date. Do you?
And I don't think that that's in the confines of our testimony, but we can provide that information to the House Ways and Means Committee, a clarification to that, and then that can clarify that issue.
My understanding is that it was October 2020, but we appreciate your clarification of that. Did Assistant U.S. Secretary Wolf's decision not to execute a search warrant on Hunter Biden strike you as atypical, Mr. Shapley?
Generally, in any other investigation, if we have probable cause and we believe there's evidence in that location that could help prove our violations, then we would execute that search warrant.
So it was an unusual action.
Yes, Congresswoman.
Thank you. Is it fair to conclude that this pattern of odd, atypical, and sometimes bewildering actions taken by DOJ Tax and the District Attorney's Office happened over the course of the entire investigation and not just one or two occurrences?
That's correct, and it was the pattern that really drove me to, one of the things that drove me to come forward of that deviation from a normal investigative processes.
In your opinion, did these odd, atypical, and bewildering actions bolster or harm the investigation?
I believe they hurt the investigation.
To our chairman, I would say that there's something rotten in the state of Delaware, and that what has happened here with Hunter Biden would not have happened to other Americans. And this is totally unfair, and I think it's very important that we get to the bottom of this investigation and find out who has been obstructing this sense of justice. The American people demand justice, and this committee demands justice along with the other committees involved, and I thank you for this hearing. Thank our witnesses.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Chair now recognizes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is not a game. This is very serious business. And I think at the end, it will be proven to the American people that this is serious business. And we need to get on with it. And we need to have the other side to stop playing games. Ms. O'Connor, in a column published in the Wall Street Journal, you stated that the typical timidity of IRS criminal tax lawyers in recommending prosecution is, quote, common knowledge in the tax enforcement community, end quote. Can you explain where this timidity comes from?
I don't know this source of it. Thank you for the question. But it is common knowledge in the tax enforcement community. The tax division is required to authorize any criminal tax charges that are going to be brought. In order to inform itself, the special agent report is provided to the tax division. Before it gets to the tax division, IRS criminal tax attorneys review it. They are, because, I'm sorry, having trouble answering this, but
let me give you some more guidance.
Okay.
So before bringing charges, IRS criminal lawyers, as you're alluding to, provide advisory views in a special agent report. Is that correct?
Right, and they are
Okay.
they are advisory only. And the IRS, as any prosecutor is very determined to have a very high conviction rate. So they
Okay.
want to be very, very careful that if they bring a case, they will win it.
All right. So can you describe a typical special agent report and the special agent report specific to Hunter Biden's case?
Certainly. The whistleblowers have testified that nearly 1,000 pages were provided in the special agent report to the tax division. That special agent report consisted not only of a discussion of what they had discovered, but also every bit of evidence that they found that supported each element of each crime for each year for which they were recommending charges.
Okay, let me follow up again, please. More than a year after DOJ's tax division received this report, the division created a 99-page memorandum supporting the recommended charges. Is that correct?
I might be wrong about how long it took the tax division. I've seen other information suggesting it was a much shorter period of time.
But they did do that.
I understand that the tax division did produce a 99-page memo authorizing all the charges the special agents had recommended.
Thank you. So, Ms. O'Connor, you said DOJ's tax division recommended 6 felonies and 5 misdemeanors. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Hunter Biden was only initially charged with 2 counts of willful failure to pay federal income taxes as part of the plea deal. Is that correct?
Right, for just 2 years.
And these are misdemeanors?
Right.
Okay. But the maximum penalty for these charges is a fine of $25,000 as well as up to 1 year in federal prison. Is that correct?
Or both.
Or both. Yet Hunter Biden owed more than $100,000 in both 2017 and 2018, correct?
That's what the criminal information alleged. I think that's a ballpark figure.
Okay. Based on the answers you just provided, it's extremely difficult to believe that an individual who is not the son of the sitting U.S. president would be treated this way. We're told the Department of Justice treats all citizens equally under the law. But based on the evidence this committee has presented, that is not what happened in Delaware. Based on your experience, would you agree that that's not what happened in Delaware?
Exactly, and it was particularly galling because just in the next state, in New Jersey, a mechanic was being sentenced to 2 years for having not paid like $100,000 in taxes.
So, in this case, there was not equal justice under the law being proposed.
Absolutely not.
It was totally unequal justice. That is not what this country stands for. We want everybody being treated the same under the law, and my colleagues should feel the same way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Good lady yields back. Before I recognize Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, I asked unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from Lev Parnas, who Mr. Raskins continues to refer to. It's actually a press release from the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. It's Lev Parnas, sentenced to 20 months in prison for campaign finance, wire fraud, and false statement offenses.
Yeah, he worked with
Without
Rudy
objection,
Giuliani.
so ordered.
Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 61, printed in Part D of House Report number 118-216, offered by Ms. Foxx of North Carolina.
Pursuant to House Resolution 723, the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Foxx, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of my amendment. My amendment is simple. It would prevent taxpayer funds from paying for State Department employees to travel to or attend events hosted by the Clinton Global Initiative. The rationale is quite simple. The Clinton Global Initiative has engaged in blatant corruption and influence peddling that would make even Hunter Biden blush. In perhaps its most famous episode in 2014, Hillary Clinton approached the Moroccan government about hosting a Clinton Global Initiative conference in Morocco. The Moroccans fronted the money for the event by funneling it through a state-owned enterprise that was extracting and exploiting phosphates from a non-self-governing territory, Western Sahara. This sleight of hand amounted to condoning Morocco's sovereignty over this disputed land. You heard that right. It was cash for sovereignty deal formulated just as former Secretary of State Clinton began her run for president of the free world. This deal was so rotten that even the Huffington Post deemed Fox News' investigation into this matter a, quote, brutal, clean hit on Hillary Clinton's campaign, end quote. Indeed, the Clinton Global Initiative scandals are myriad and include an episode uncovered by the New York Times revealing undisclosed donations linked to the sale of U.S. uranium production to a Russian government agency. As expected, the Clinton Global Initiative was unable to withstand the scrutiny and shuttered shortly after the 2016 campaign. That is, until late last year, when the organization reconstituted itself. Its operations are no longer dark, and this is the first state and foreign operations appropriations bill considered since its resurrection. It has since morphed into a factory of radical, elitist, woke schemes. Just last week, the Clinton Global Initiative convened in New York to discuss how to reshape our economy to tackle the left's pet projects that will make life for ordinary Americans more expensive and worse. Given the State Department's enmeshment with the Clintons and the initiative, we need to send a clear message. No more coordination with the U.S. government, no more conferences with corrupt governments at the expense of the oppressed people of the globe, no more representation and participation by the State Department, an end to its commingling with official policy, and hopefully the beginning of the end of this corrupt organization's influence on U.S. policymaking. Americans simply can't afford more radical policies purveyed by an organization that allows the global elite to buy and influence American foreign policy. Join me in condemning the Clinton Global Initiative's misconduct. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
I rise in opposition to this amendment.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, boy, is this the level we've gotten to tell the State Department what meetings they cannot attend? Will we start saying what meetings they have to attend? The Clinton Global Initiative is a platform for government, philanthropy, business, media, and academia to discuss identified problems and to brainstorm solutions. We should be encouraging such collaboration. The problems facing the world are daunting, and solutions will not come from one place. Let's take good ideas from wherever we can and not micromanage who goes to what meetings. I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see that my colleague has not refuted any of the things that I've said about the Clinton Global Initiative. Why in the world, again, would we ask American taxpayers to pay for people from the State Department to attend these conferences when they're likely not to gain anything positive from them and support a corrupt organization? I reserve.
Gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I understand what this amendment does, and I don't accept the fact that it's a corrupt organization, and I do know the importance of these meetings and conferences in terms of us coming together for solutions to lead us to global peace and security. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, may I inquire as to how much time I have left?
1.5 minutes. 1.5 minutes.
1.5 minutes. Mr. Chairman, we have a terrific debt on our hands in this country. We don't need to be spending any money that is not absolutely necessary to spend. Curbing attendance at meetings such as the Clinton Global Initiative is a good way for us to chip away at that debt and to save the American taxpayers some money. I think this is an excellent amendment. I believe that my colleagues will see that it's an excellent amendment, and I will continue to advocate for its passage, and I reserve.
The gentleman from North Carolina reserves. Gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, finally, I'll just say what this does is another attempt to chip away at our diplomacy. I yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman from California yields. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to offer this amendment. I believe, again, that it is good for us to highlight this organization and the fact that we do not need people from the State Department attending its meetings. And with that, I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman from North Carolina yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Good friend from Pennsylvania.
I'll take that as a compliment.
For any questions he may have for the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of time, I too am going to yield back.
I recognize my good friend, gentlelady from Pennsylvania, for any questions she may have. Okay. And I would recognize the gentleman from Kentucky for any questions he may have.
I'm actually going to go on with the trend here, although I had some questions for my good friend Bobby Scott. I'm going to yield back.
Okay.
I'll ask him personally.
And now recognize my good friend from Colorado for any questions he may have.
I do have a couple of quick questions, and I will apologize for breaking the trend, but...
It's between you and your ranking member.
I know, as he's dutifully reminded me, so I will keep it very brief. I do have to just, to the ranking member and to the chairwoman, thank you both for being here. Thank you for your testimony. I just want to talk a bit about the student loan rule. Madam Chair, certainly respect your position, but I was a bit surprised by, I wrote the phrase you wrote down, or phrase rather that you used to describe this loan program. It was, quote, unlawful free college agenda, end quote. And part of what I'm struggling is trying to find where within this regulation that characterization would fit. And here's why. So just by way of example, my understanding of the program changes is that under the existing income-driven repayment program, the IDR, essentially a borrower would have 10% of their income, or rather, they would have to pay 10% of their income, and it would be classified at excess of 150% at poverty level, right? That's the baseline in the existing program today. And what the Biden administration is changing is essentially dropping that to 5% of income and then increasing the poverty level calculation to 225%. Is that generally accurate?
It is, but what will result in the income-driven repayment plan, we believe, is that only 22% of borrowers will actually pay back fully their loan. That is a very, very low percentage of people paying back their loan, and loan balances will be forgiven as early as 10 years instead of 20 to 25 years, which is done now. You know, we don't want to make college and university educations inaccessible. They're very accessible now. The problem we have is that many people that the cost of college is going up in direct proportion to how much money the federal government, that is, the taxpayers of this country, are putting into these programs. And by doing this, you're simply going to continue to drive up the cost of education. So we want the responsibility to be fairly borne by the people who borrow the money and benefit from it.
I thank you, Madam Chair. And what I would suggest, and I want to give the ranking member an opportunity to opine in here as well, I understand the argument that you're making, and I'm simply suggesting that the mechanics of this particular rule that the Biden administration has promulgated, I don't think could be accurately described as a free college agenda, when most of the changes that the Biden administration is pursuing, let me just give you an example. One of the changes within this rule is enabling a borrower who files their taxes separately from their spouse from not having their spouse's income used to calculate their expected repayment amount. That's a practical common sense change that a lot of members of Congress on a bipartisan basis have called for. Another change, just to give you an example, this is within the body of the rule, is that it would extend forbearance for those borrowers who enter into military service, for those borrowers who are undergoing cancer treatment, for those borrowers who are impacted by a natural disaster. That's one of the changes that the Biden administration has proposed in this rule. And to the extent there is forgiveness, as you said, it's a modification from existing programs, again, depending on the income levels, but it is not wholesale cancellation. Of course, we entertained a resolution about that particular issue earlier this year, but this isn't it. And so I would just say that I think this is a common sense way to ultimately ensure that Americans are not weighted down. You're talking about individuals who are raising a family, trying to afford groceries and pay their heating bills, that they're not weighted down unnecessarily by a large loan payment. So with that, I'll give the ranking member a chance to respond, and I think.
Well, I think we have a fundamental disagreement on our committee. I believe in the signing statement when President Johnson signed the Higher Education Act, he said that it meant that any student from any state could apply to any college or university and not be turned away because the family is poor. Since then, the value of the Pell Grant is eroded, and the only way students can go to college now for a huge portion of them is by incurring crushing debt. That, in my judgment, is unfair. This allows those to pay what they can afford on their college debt for 10 to 25 years, but there ought to be some end to it. The president has a reasonable proposal to help people get into college, and once they have incurred the debt, be able to reasonably pay it back.
Thank you.
Before I ask my questions, let me do some housekeeping. Under Committee Rule 9, we'll now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule. I remind members that I'll strictly enforce the 5-minute rule. So members are advised to keep your questions succinct so the witnesses have time to answer. Please don't talk for 4 minutes and then ask the witness a question. We've heard from many students that they do not feel safe. You've talked about that in your statements. But the anti-Semitism we've seen on your campuses didn't come out of nowhere. There are cultures at your institutions that foster it because you have faculty and students who hate Jews, hate Israel, and are comfortable apologizing for terror. How did your campuses get this way? What is it about the way that you hire faculty and approve curriculum that's allowing your campuses to be infected by this intellectual and moral rot? President Gay, I'm going to ask you to give me a brief answer. I also would invite you to follow up with more in writing, and we will follow up with you. So I will go down the line, President Gay, then President McGill, and President Kornbluth.
Thank you, Chairwoman Foxx. Again, anti-Semitism has no place at Harvard. When we recruit faculty, we do so with the understanding that they are joining a community where we honor, celebrate, and nurture open discourse, both on the campus and in the classroom. And to be a successful teacher and educator at Harvard requires the ability to draw out all of the viewpoints and voices in your classroom, irrespective of one's political views. And we devote significant resources to training our faculty in that pedagogical skill and to prioritizing that in our recruiting and hiring.
Thank you. Ms. McGill.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the question. I'm troubled by what you're reporting about the culture of the institutions that we're leading, very contrary to the values that I hold as a leader of University of Pennsylvania, as well as the institution, where any form of hate is very contrary to our values. I would venture and answer Chairwoman Foxx that anti-Semitism has a role in the broader society, and that's what we're seeing happening in the society and on our campuses. And I'm committed to combating it in immediate term and the long term.
Thank you. Dr. Kornbluth.
Yes, so MIT is a majority STEM education and research institution, and we are devoted to solving the problems that face society. Our faculty are hired for their brilliance. Now, we allow them to say what they'd like in the classroom in the name of free expression, but we are committed to having them know that that our campus must be a welcoming and inclusive environment. And although they may say what they like in the classroom academically, targeting any individual student, harassing or discriminating is strictly forbidden in our classrooms and on campus.
Thank you. We will be following up with asking for specific plans for disciplining student and faculty who assault or harass students or prevent them from accessing undisrupted classes or campus spaces. We'll be asking for your plan for preventing this rot from perpetuating, how you're going to hire and assess instructors, how will you change how you govern students, and what are the practical steps you will plan to take. I want to ask you one more question. As I've said, and Ms. McGill, I appreciate the fact that you feel concerned about my feeling about the fundamental culture on the campuses that's foundational to this issue, denial of the right of Israel to exist. So I want to ask each one of you, President Gay, do you believe that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish nation?
I agree that the state of Israel has the right to exist.
Ms. McGill, same question.
I agree, Chairwoman Foxx, the state of Israel has the right to exist.
Dr. Kornbluth.
Absolutely. Israel has the right to exist.
I want to thank our witnesses again for being here and to say we will follow up and to tell you that while we've talked about a larger culture out there, it's the universities who should be examples of what this nation is all about. I yield